Hello there, and welcome to week 14 of Media Planning and Buying J322 Online. Of course, as always, I'm your instructor, Michael Betker. It's been a bit of time since we've talked last. I do apologize for that. We can catch up today. So today is an important lecture. Let's proceed. So a lot's going on in this one here. I would encourage you guys, if you're just starting to listen to this and you like to skim, I would encourage you guys to watch this through. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but we have a lot to cover this week because it's setting us up for our final approach for this class and for this semester. So first thing I want to talk about is assignment 8, strategy and niche. And I think a lot of you guys have already gotten started on this. Just know that this is a summary document. The other big piece of this is assignment 7, of course, was individual. I asked you guys to go off on your own and do your own work there, and then come back to your team and share your hard-earned work. So that's important, right? And of course, assignment 7 is kind of fun because it's more or less just casting a wide net and looking for connections, following through on hunches that you might have uncovered through your research. And what we're really looking for here is just one solid concept, one solid insight into your brands. And of course, assignment 8 now is meant to take those, the best of the best here, and develop a strategy around that insight. So that's assignment 8. We'll talk about that, and then kind of want to talk about the final presentation schedule and reminders quickly, and then we'll get into a bit of a lecture here. We just want to do one short lecture here, last of the semester, which is on Young, Chapter 13, Big Data and Analytics. That should take about maybe less than 20 minutes. And then we're going to talk a bit about making the pitch. So obviously, you guys are all scheduled now, so you'll know when your team goes. I want to talk about what I'm looking for here. And obviously, things have been changed a bit because of coronavirus. Thanks a lot, Corona. But how we do that on Zoom is kind of where I'm thinking now. We're going to do this live, so our classes that we had scheduled for our presentations are still going to happen now. So we have 11 teams and 11 pitches to make over 3 days. So we'll talk about that as well. Last but not least, I'm going to share with you guys the final exam study guide. Anyway, that's it for this week. Let's get into it. So here's strategy and niche. Some people like to say niche. I prefer niche. So it's time for us to put up or shut up, right? It's time to find your strategy and go with it. So we've done a lot of thinking about our brands and hopefully a lot of collaboration with your teams. So we're looking for that special strategy you'll come up with. And this is how we do it, frankly, in the world outside. When you're out and about and you graduate and you get into your field, whatever it happens to be, whether it's on the client side or the agency side, you'll be asked to think strategically within teams. So that's what this is all about. So I'm expecting you guys to hopefully do that and bounce things off one another, even if it is digital. So we're looking for that one idea. So here's the task, right? And again, it's no different, but you're basically taking that insight or those insights that you've uncovered to support both your strategy and your tactics. And assignment A is really a short, quick, like elevator pitch, 1 to 2 pages, summarizing your strategy. So it's almost like a blueprint for your presentation. So that's why this is the last one. It's like a cherry on top of all the assignments. Here are the deliverables. So here's the document that I want to expect of you guys. Again, a restatement of your plan objectives and time frame. Second bullet point, a section that defines your target audience, identifies a few key drivers and barriers, and then describes a few of the best aperture opportunities. And remember, we know aperture opportunities can be a lot of different things, but it's moments in time where your target audience is receptive to the message. Third bullet point there, the strategic narrative. Capture no less than 50 words and no more than 250 words, the key points of your strategy, and then brief descriptions of each of your tactics that you recommend underneath of that strategy. Along the way here, we're also looking for at least 3 niche and promotional extensions that might be leveraged through the media buys and through minimal incremental spendings. And then, of course, I want you to also dig deep here and come up with a cool, creative guerrilla concept that's localized. So when I say localized, let's say, for example, I don't know if you remember this, but remember we had we showed the video, the Coke video in Atlanta, where they had the Coke machine that dispensed more than just Coca-Cola, like sub sandwiches and pizza. That's a great example of a guerrilla concept. Now, why would they go in Atlanta? Because remember we discussed that was a Pepsi market at the time. So Coke was going in on the offensive in a market that was not theirs. So that's the kind of strategy we're looking for there. So this is due on Sunday, 4/26, of course, and right behind that, then we have our final presentation. So That is strategy and niche. There's an example, obviously, as well that I provided for you guys from my days when I worked for Briggs & Stratton for HVAC. We worked with several companies who sold, we saw a parallel between generators, standby generators, and air conditioning and heating. So we felt that there was an opportunity for us to kind of make our products known in those channels. So that's kind of what you see there. That's a good example. You can take a look at that. So I'm not looking for this long paper here. It's a very condensed, very focused strategy. All right. So what are you going to be doing the next couple of weeks here? Here's what I recommend. All right. So if you haven't done so already, you should look at assignment number 7 and discuss your VOC findings. That is why I specifically had you guys go off on your own, because you want to cast a wide net there and look for any clues about how you handle things. Now, obviously, that might have uncovered some things about COVID-19 that might pique your interest regarding strategy. I fully encourage that. It's a good example of how you take the cards you're dealt with, the brand that you're working with, and the cards you're dealt with, and then coming up with a strategy that supports that. A lot of brands right now are doing the PR shuffle. So in other words, you're seeing a lot of folks kind of taking the high road and working with customers and showing their big shoulders and being willing to help people and create goodwill. Some others, like, for example, think about Zoom. We're going to be using Zoom. Zoom has zoomed up and taken off because of what happened. So depending on your industry, you want to kind of take stock in that. And hopefully your VOC findings from assignment 7 has kind of helped you guys build those strategies. Of course, you want to refine and confirm those key insights. And usually you go from the 6 I've asked you to do for these assignments down to 1, maybe 2. But generally, if you got one good solid one, that's the goal. And that's all you need really to develop a cogent thesis and IMC campaign. So toward that end, you want to, from this strategy, number 8 is also obviously about building that strategy, that IMC campaign. And that's kind of the thing that you'll use to build your presentations with. Assigning tasks, now obviously you're going to work together on assignment 8. That's not, assignment 7 was on your own. Number 8 is now, again, a team effort. So using the meeting forums, discussion posts, certainly get grades for that, but also just getting together digitally. Now, I really do not want you guys to get together face-to-face. It's not worth it. But definitely want to take the lead and schedule stuff so you guys can get prepared. I'm going to try as much as possible to maintain the tenets of this class. So toward that end, you guys want to use that time wisely. Assign tasks. Who's going to write the paper? Who's going to, you guys take turns? That's great. If I were you guys, I would, like the person who's got the best writing skills to craft the paper and then have others do editing or maybe do the research piece. But how you decide you want to divide up the tasks is up to you. Obviously, you have a presentation to think about, and we'll talk more about that in the upcoming slides. And then the other thing, too, I got to stress this as well, is practice. Once you get your basic slides together, I would jump on a Zoom call with your team and then go through it a few times. Just practice, practice, practice. The more you do that, the better flow you'll have. And one of the intangibles here in marketing, even within media planning and buying, is how well you present yourself. So the best teams have done, who get good grades on their final presentations are those who have taken the time to practice. So the schedule, final presentations, 4:30, 5:5, and 5:7. The original syllabus I had an additional day in there. I've cut that off to give you guys more time. So we're going to have 3 sessions there, and you guys already know kind of when you present. I'll show you that in a second here. Last thing we'll talk about today in this lecture is the final exam, which is on 5/12 from 4:45 to 6:45. We'll talk about that more. Here is the schedule. So the first team on Thursday, 4:30 at 5 o'clock is Vans. Second is Taco Bell. Third is Dr. Martin's. So that's the first day, and we're going to get this nailed down. Now, we're fortunate because we actually tried Zoom once already. We had Kay Weigel in. I think most of you guys were there for that. So it's pretty intuitive, pretty easy to use, right? So what I'll probably do is have you guys all come in. We'll get you settled, and then each team will go. And I'll have everybody turn off their mics, or I'll turn off everybody's mics, and I'll turn over the presentation to Vans first. So Beth, Jeff, and Tyler, you'll have the floor first. And then, of course, we'll pass and pivot on to Taco Bell and so on and so forth. So we'll do 3 on Thursday. Of course, attendance is mandatory. If you're not presenting, it doesn't mean you can't show up. And I know everybody's stuck in one place, so you can't say, unless you're sick or something else. But by and large, please, please, please try to be there and be engaged. We will have a Q&A at the end of each presentation. So that's when you'll have an opportunity to kind of engage with the team, and I will be monitoring kind of your responses to questions, and I may lob a few questions out there for you guys as well. Of course, Tuesday, 5/5, and there's a little bit of time there. Now, obviously, There's not an easy way to be fair about this, so everybody has the same sort of due date. But that's why I got these dates out there early, so you guys can kind of mentally prepare. So 5/5 is Adidas, Spotify, Hulu, and JanSport. And then 5/7 is New Balance, Jeep, Neutrogena, and Dunkin'. So I'd like you guys to have the day you present, have your presentation done and your paper done the day you present. That'll make it easier for you guys to present intelligently, and I would rather not have you guys write the paper afterwards. I want them to be simpatico, which means that they connect to one another. So just the way it is. Let me know if you have any questions on that, but that's kind of how we're going to do things. I encourage you guys to keep meeting. It sounds like a lot of you guys are already kind of discussing things. So let's talk about this week's sort of lecture, and it's chapter 13 in the Young Book, so not the Media Planning and Buying textbook. I want to talk about big data a little bit, and I like the Young Book because it does talk about examples, so we'll talk about those here in class. It starts out by talking about math, moving from Mad Men to Math Men. So if you haven't ever watched Mad Men, that's a wonderful concept for you guys to think about, especially if you're advertising majors, and even if you're PR majors as well. But either way, it gives you a glimpse to what it was like to work in advertising back in the 60s. So really cool there, and a lot of crossover between what we know now. But really what it comes down to is this, right? Back in the day, it was more about branding. Agencies kind of used a lot of intuition to make decisions about advertising, right? And it didn't matter if the math added up necessarily. It was more about how good the creative was. And as we know how they build people, the creative was free. It was more about maintaining that relationship and, of course, how much they spent. 15% of that went to the agency. So if they spent $1 million, 15% of that, of the advertising dollars would go to the agency. That's how they did it back in the day. Now, obviously, things are different. Agencies now are beholden to the truth being data. So that's where you see the sea change in how agencies have kind of how they sink or swim. And it really does come down to data. So that's what we're all about here in media planning and buying, and obviously we're seeing more and more of that. So that's what Chapter 13 is all about. It's about big data. So we're going to talk about big data here. And that's frankly what this is all about. If you were curious just to know why that sort of large-looking android person there is, if you don't watch Star Trek, you wouldn't know who that is, but his name is Data. He's an android, and he features prominently in a lot of the Star Trek Next Generation show. So that's my little joke there. I hope you guys got that. Either way, if you didn't, but now you know. All right, so from Mad Men to Math Men. According to Mindshare, the average consumer uploads 3,654 pieces of personal information onto a database every week. That seems like a big number, but probably true. Now, it's not a stuff that we always do consciously, right? As we know, we're being monitored all the time. So again, using Facebook as an example, right? So we're always on Facebook. A lot of us are anyway. Anything you post, anything you do, any action, any click that you make is recorded digitally. So that's kind of what they're talking about. There's packets of information about you. That kind of collates into some sort of a decision-making process that happens. And of course, we as advertisers, it's a double-edged sword, right? Part of me thinks, gosh, I don't want them to know that stuff about me. But the same token, when I see an ad served up, that's seems perfect to me. I'm like, it seems to work pretty well. So the ability to collect this data, develop insights, and activate marketing programs as a result of the insight is taking on increasing proportions, as we know. So data is king these days. So why the shift to data in media? So here's some things I want to share with you guys, and this is articulating some of the higher points, the bigger points in this chapter 13. First thing you should know, and I know you guys know this because you probably do this like I do. When a show's on, I'll have my phone out, and maybe even my laptop, or maybe even my iPad. So I'm multitasking. We all do that now. Information overload, right? I'm listening to podcasts while I'm doing things here at my desk. So there's multi-screen metrics we have to be aware of now. What that does basically is it provides instant measurement and budget shifting based on offline versus online behaviors. So offline is, of course, television. And then online behaviors, anything you do digitally. And there's a strong connection now. And as we know, watching the Super Bowl, assignment 3, the Super Bowl advertising assignment, brands are now spending a lot of time connecting their offline versus and online behaviors together into one larger IMC campaign. So improved targeting, of course, as well. We know now increased specificity of target markets with highly relevant messages is a big difference maker these days. We now can go down to a fine detail who we want to target using both offline and online behaviors. Third point, digitization of media inventory we are able now more than ever to kind of move things like budget as we need to, like we do when we buy pay-per-click advertising, right? In the moment, you can almost change an ad. You can change an ad and shift dollars or stop things entirely. This ability now is being moved over to all kinds of different opportunities, right? Including even television. So eventually we're going to see this emerging, and we already see this with cord cutters and folks who have moved away from television to a all digital format. We have been in my house, the Becker household, cut the cord 4 years ago. So the last one there, common data platforms. Data sets are now more connected than ever, so data can be combined from sales, CRM, media to Sharp, and they're all built to sharpen and improve our marketing activities. So digital is really transforming everything, and it's kind of scary, frankly, if you think about it, how on the rails some of this stuff is these days, especially if you think about programmatic, which is, okay, here's what I want to sell. Here's information about my target audience. Now go out there and pulse these ads out to markets and to media types that are meaningful to my consumer base, and it's all automatic. That's thanks to a lot of this shift from the Mad Men world to big data. We've talked about some of these already, but I'll just kind of refresh these with you again, how data is changing our marketing kind of outbound. Of course, the 4 Ps are always important, so each of these here the book talks about, and in the example I'll give, and we've talked about this one already, the Coca-Cola piece, right? Having vending machines where people can go in and mix and match their colas, right? The different types of soda that they have, right? Ultimately, that's being recorded. So anytime anybody pushes X, Y, or Z type of soda, they're taking stock in that. So if you see any trends that kind of erupt from that, that can lead to new products. One example of how data is changing marketing. Pricing, one example, and I know a lot of baseball, and God, I miss baseball. Hopefully we'll see some baseball this summer, but the St. Louis Cardinals use online data that includes the number of searches for tickets, weather forecasts, and player status to help predict and adjust the ticket prices. So that's kind of happening in real time as well. So you'll see pricing based on weather even, or other things, crazy stuff. But nonetheless, know that big data is also helping people maximize their income. Place. Tesco, now that's like Target or Walmart in England, adapting their retail footprint. I'm assuming they were doing the same thing here in the States, but this is from the book. Using mobile to enable consumers to instantly purchase products via outdoor advertising. So you drive by a billboard, you can automatically make a purchase. So it's like in the moment purchasing. The last one here, promotion. Of course, Nike employed over 21,000 ad units tailored to specific users on Facebook. So it's that long tail. Nike's really, really perfected being able to go out there on that long tail and handcraft personal messages to those 21,000 ad units, those folks. So that's some examples the book talks about there. So what does that mean? Who knows what 5 years from now will look like, but I can tell you there's a hockey stick of convergence happening with the digital world we live in. So it is a bit like The Matrix. If you haven't seen that movie, by the way, I highly recommend it. Of course, Keanu was one of my all-time favorite actors, but futuristic and certainly not totally related to what we're talking about here, but nonetheless, we are in a very interesting times. I'm going to shift the gears here and talk about politics a little bit now. Obviously, we have an upcoming election, and I would say Brad Parscale has taken what we're going to talk about here to a new level for the Trump campaign. He's really pushing the envelope with things now. Love him or hate him, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, doesn't matter. It's for us, we have to look at this agnostically and just marvel at how data and how we are approaching, advertising within the vein of politics. And it's happening, at such a high level that it usually informs what we do downstream with products. So here's one example, and this is from the Obama campaign, where when Obama was running against Mitt Romney, there's a picture of him right there, where he said in a campaign, or a debate, but he said, binders full of women, is what he said. So really, if you read the chapter for chapter 13, they'll talk about this. I'll just paraphrase here, but the Obama campaign capitalized on that statement there, and right away came out with a campaign that really kind of turned his words against him. And you still see this stuff today, right? Just today I saw some advertising and things that made Nancy Pelosi seem like she was being heartless and cold when she was on a show talking about her refrigerator filled with ice cream. I'm sure you guys have probably seen that, right? But that's a good example of what happened to Romney back a few years ago. So using those kinds of things and tying that back to your target audience in such a way that kind of draws their ire up and creates a more solidified base. So obviously, and we'll talk more. There's a video I want to have you guys watch about Obama's campaign where he really kind of took it to the next level. I would say Brad Parscale and the Trump campaign is even doing a more aggressive job there. The ability to be more personalized in real time, that's another thing about data that you'll see, right? And we know now about these ads that follow you around. You go onto a site, you look at your pair of shoes, and you decide not to buy. And then you go to another site and you look at something else, and there those shoes are in an ad in the lower right corner. Obviously, we know that that works. It's called retargeting, and that has perceived, not just a perceived value, but it certainly increases sale through. Traditional media are more data rich. Generally, now this is a good example of folks who are about to get gas, right? So if you haven't noticed this, a lot of more current gas stations have displays and they'll play ads while you're there pumping gas. So it's a really short period of time, yet it's really latent with content. So I've always kind of noticed that and kind of taken stock in what they show you. Sometimes they play a tune, but usually they're selling something or they're pushing some idea. So that's interesting as well to see that happen. We talked about this already, second screen opportunities. The fact that people sit around and watch TV and nobody does that without having some other device in their hands, whether it's a laptop or a cell phone. But that's again the new age of media planning and buying, just being aware of that second screen opportunity to market to your target audience. And we talked about this as well, sale of beer. Again, this is related to some of the Midwestern teams, specifically the Chicago Cubs. And the book talks about how a certain temperature made it the most opportune time to sell beer. And it was, I think, 52 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, kind of odd that a certain number, apparently that's good beer drinking weather at 52 degrees. To me, a beer tastes just as good at 30 degrees, but apparently 52 is the magic number there. So another example of how we can use real-time consumer data from past sales of beer and temperature, making that correlation between the two. All right. We talked about politics before when we talked about Mitt Romney. The 2012 election, right? And micro-targeting. If you remember from previous discussions, we talked about how Clinton targeted soccer moms, right? So micro-targeting is next level here. And this video is actually in our Canvas site for week 14, so I encourage you guys to go watch that. It's not just a couple minutes, 2 minutes, 27 seconds. So watch that. And then, like I said, Brad Parscale, you might find some other stuff out there as well. Type in his name in Google, or in YouTube rather, and see if you can find anything there about what Trump's up to with his micro-targeting, but kind of an eye-opener there. The book talks about adaptive marketing as well, and we've touched on that a little bit. This statement here from Jennifer Frommer from Interscope Records, who managed the Robin Thicke song from a few years ago called Blurred Lines. It wasn't just something that happened per chance, right? Certainly a catchy tune, and lots of folks loved that, and became, among others, one of the top songs for the summer a few years ago. She said, listen, adapt, adjust, and shift. So they played around with smaller launches of the song to get feedback from consumers before they launched to the national audience. So read into that on chapter 13 as well, but I thought that was interesting as well. No marketing, no vertical, no industry is without sort of this idea of using big data. A couple examples again. Here's the Coca-Cola example of mixing different flavors. And to the right here, one of my all-time favorites is just Oreo and how they handle their marketing in real time. That's a good example of adaptive marketing. If you remember a few years ago when the power went out during the Super Bowl, everybody was watching, the lights go out. And what did Oreo do? Well, they were fleet of foot, and of course they advertised right away with this really quick, great, punchy copy. Power out, no problem. And then, of course, there's a little ad there for their cookies. You can still dunk in the dark. My people in my industry, and I sell, of course, for a long time I sold generators, which supply power. We were all marveling about that, and of course, from that sprang out what I developed a program as a result of that ad. To be honest, where we actually were fleet of foot like Oreo, where we would go and track outages and pulse advertising out the moment it happened in areas where people had access to basic power. For example, your cell phone. So. Great idea that we capitalized on. Speaking of the Super Bowl, here's some data you might get, right? You kind of understand the Super Bowl is a big place to do this kind of stuff. So you get a lot of data and a lot of information about the shows that you're advertising on. Of course, again, second screen opportunities. If you think about the Oreo cookie example here, right? That's a tweet. So that's how they tie together. You kind of know who's out there, and then of course you use the second-hand opportunity, the screen opportunity to really reach them in a big way. Book talks about Kleenex as well, so I'm going to paraphrase this here pretty quickly. I'd encourage you to read this, but back in the day, they were trying to sell Kleenex, and sales in Kleenex in Europe, in England, were down. So what did they do? Well, it's simple. And again, this is simple, basic mathematics and just putting two and two together. What did they do? They just tracked viruses. Now, obviously, that's kind of puts a new meaning on things now with coronavirus, but you really can do a good job of tracking where colds are happening and outbreaks of colds. And that's what they did with Kleenex, right? They just knew where centers of various viruses and colds that were happening today, and of course, increased their advertising. Very similar to what I did with Generac and with Briggs & Stratton, we targeted areas where the power goes out frequently, and we were able to make increased sales in those areas. Harrah's also does similar to this. The book talks about Harrah's a little bit too, and of course they always have to price their hotel rooms, right, and which hotel rooms are worth the most. Harrah's knew that certain windows and certain views were more important than others. So apparently a view from the strip is more important than others, so they were able to use that as a way of increasing and maximizing their profit. Another great example I want to share with you guys, this is, again, I'm not going to show this now, it's in a link in Canvas, Samsung versus Apple. Okay, so what happened there was Samsung was able to infiltrate the Apple pre-launch meetings. So they were able to kind of sneak in there and they got information about that. So take a look at that. But what Samsung did with that information was create a counter ad, an ad that kind of poked fun at Apple in a lot of ways. And if you look at some of the comments below, you'll see these comments about how Samsung was dead on about Apple and kind of made fun of them and sort of climbed up the ladder based on consumer research. In this case here, I would say kind of nefarious, backhanded sort of behavior by infiltrating these meetings. That's why companies are so tight-lipped about their new product launches. But Samsung somehow managed to sneak in there and created some ads. This ad here, you guys will take a look at that. We'll show you kind of how they capitalized on that against Apple. All right, so summary of this chapter here. Staying up with technology is a requisite for an agency. So obviously here we are. We're focused on digital quite a bit in this class. I would say this. After you leave this class and you move on to your capstone or whatever you're going to do in your life, can't stress this enough. Stay on top of the technology. It's ever changing. Every day is a new day, and every day is a new chance to look and learn about new technology. So that's one piece. Brand media strategy is as important as the brand strategy. So here we are now, fast forward, where Mad Men, right, used to be about brand, right? All about brand and nothing else. Now it's kind of flipped, right? Brand is important, but it's not as important as the media strategy. Third point, adaptive marketing through data is opening opportunities to create more precision and relevance. Certainly, and of course, we're always looking for most efficient spend. The more efficient you can be, it really kind of pins itself on how well you know your target audience and where they're at. And last one, their ads are more relevant, persuasive, and efficient because they have the ability to deploy these qualities at scale through technologies that allow micro-targeting, and Clinton with the soccer moms, geolocation, so in other words, going into a location where you know it's a target-rich environment, like for example, when we showed the ads in Atlanta for Coca-Cola and flipping that market, and then of course adaptive planning. So just thinking about, again, using the milk example, our Got Milk campaign early on, the IMC campaign focused on areas where people would buy the product. All right, so you guys as teams, how do you take all this information? Now, I will say this. We've had 2 good guest speakers this semester, and I think most people saw or witnessed Kay Weigel's presentation we had on Zoom a couple weeks ago. So lots of great ideas in there, and I'll make that available to you guys as well. But I strongly encourage you guys to take the information and the new ideas, like for example, geofencing and geotargeting, right? The fact you can use your cell phone to do that. Why not take some of those ideas and build something out? Having the idea and presenting yourself intelligently, and if it makes a connection to me and to your target audience, that's a win. But push the envelope there. This is only going to help you down the road, right? At this point, we're not going to put anything to practice, but show me your evidence of your good thinking there, right? So, what new insights into the consumer can you employ for your campaigns? What sub or micro targets? So, is there a soccer mom sub-market that you're looking for? You can identify, and that would be a viable campaign as well, because you don't need to do. If you have 1 million people who are fit a certain micro target, why not target them as your part of your campaign? That will have huge impact. Beyond target demographics, are there opportunities to target by context, location, occasion, or other? So again, that's talking about aperture moments, right? So location, context, and occasion are 3 big things to think about. Is there an opportunity, number 4 here, to be more real-time and adaptive with the media plan? I built my advertising around in the moment when the power outages happened, right? We had an immediate response. So what is that something you can capitalize on as well? Just being able to be fleet of foot and adaptive to the situation. Here's a good example for you, COVID-19. Are you guys percolating on ideas around COVID-19? How do you capitalize on what's happening to everybody? And we're all going through something. How does your brand capitalize on that? Good questions to ask here with your teams. All right. So that's chapter 13 in a nutshell, and kind of how you can tie that back to what you're thinking about here with your final presentations. In every case, use data to your advantage, right? You know your target audience fairly well now. Really build out your thinking here. And when you get on these Zoom calls, if you're doing that, I hope you are, just have a dialogue about that. Throw ideas out there, spitball with your teams, and see what comes up, okay? Watch this, all right? I talk about pitch theater and doing well with your presentations, right? So watch this short video here, and it's not a direct hit for what we're doing here, but it does give you some tips and ideas about how to present well. Because sometimes, as we know, the best plan doesn't get accepted because maybe it wasn't the best presentation. So I will say, kind of learn the basics there. And some of the things we learn in 110, right? Speaking extemporaneously, making good eye contact, showing that you have depth of understanding. The more you practice, the more natural it's going to sound and the more conversational it's going to become. All right, a couple thoughts on content organization. And again, you guys should start building this now, right? As you're working on assignment 8, you want to start stitching together your presentation as you write the paper. Did it come from the written portion, right? So, you have the written portion, which is a long form. It's probably going to be 8, maybe 10 pages. Your presentation is going to be a condensed best of the best. Did it flow in a logical manner that built the story and supported the recommendations? So I'm looking for 13 slides. Don't care how you put them in there. Obviously, there's a couple different ways to do that, but does it lead you from one to the next? And again, that's speech 110. How do you transition from one idea and one concept to the next? If someone had not read the paper, would the presentation still make sense? That's a good question, right? Ask yourself that question as you build your content. Professionalism. Are the presenters dressed professionally? So you guys should, even though you're on TV and even if you're wearing pajama bottoms, look presentable. Do their materials look professional? I'll say this, the best teams have some design sensibilities to them. So if your presentation, it should be reflective of consistency as well as your paper. So the best presentations have a commonality between the paper and the presentation itself. So what that really does is it demonstrates you understand the idea of branding with your own presentation. Do they speak in a professional manner, right? So here's where you want to take the things you've learned in this class and weave those back in. So if you're presenting B-roll, for example, use that term. If you're in every case, wherever possible, you should talk about your target audience and refer back to if it indexes well. You're recommending Gilligan's Island as a show you want your brand to be on. Talk about how it indexes well within your target audience. Those are the kinds of things that separate the good from the great with presentations. Fourth point there, do they carry themselves in a professional way and communicate positively with their body language? Again, we're going to be doing this digitally. Normally this is face-to-face, but I can still tell. Visual aids, was the presentation visually interesting? How well were overheads, props, and other visual aids used to reinforce key points? Quick thought on that. Just simpler is better. So having for example, let's say you got your one insight or maybe a couple insights. Having that there and then being able to kind of just expand upon that through conversation is kind of what we're looking for there. Preparedness was that obviously the team had rehearsed often and knew their parts. So I'm looking for everybody to take a piece or a chunk of your presentation so you spread the wealth. Were transitions seamless? So that's important as well. So that's where practice comes in and all right, just thinking it through. But you're telling a bit of a story here and you're making a pitch. You want to get the business no matter what, right? And the last one there, does the presentation effectively use the time allowed? So I'm giving you guys a maximum of 15 minutes. Try to stick to that or around that. Anything longer than that, imagine there's another team behind you, or let's say it's in the real world and you're one agency pitched against 4 others. You're only going to get so much time anyway. So I'm going to encourage you guys to spend a little bit of time on each slide and hover around that 15-minute mark. Responses to questions. So I'm going to ask questions. That might lead you down a path, but be ready to answer those questions. Did you know your materials? Here's some things you want to think about. Were they quick on their feet? Did they answer the questions well? Did they over-answer? Sometimes people want to go off on tangents until something springs up. And I'm not going to throw you guys super hard questions. I'm going to ask you questions you should know. Did they stay calm and positive no matter what? That's the thing. You don't want to lose your cool and start crying. No crying, right? So no crying up there. But stay positive no matter what. And did they know which team member would answer each question? So again, a little bit of planning goes a long way here. Attention getting quality. Did the presentation engage or connect with the audience? And I'll be kind of monitoring that as well. Audience members will have a chance to ask questions, and that'll give me one clue. Was it interesting and memorable? Certainly, did the presenters have energy, enthusiasm, and what one message stayed with the audience? So that's why your slides should not be cluttered. Stick with simple design and don't put too much on each slide. But then, of course, what's your big ta-da, right? And usually it's that insight and how you capitalize on that. All right, last thing I want to share with you guys here. So I know it's a lot of stuff, but this will probably be the last big lecture I do. Anything else now will be much shorter and to the point. So last actual lecture here, but this is the final exam study guide, which is up there as well. Our final exam is on 5/12, which is Tuesday. We're going to keep that date and time again. It's going to be open from 4:45 to 6:45, and that'll be it. All right, that's all I got for you this week here, and of course, good luck. Please let me know if you have any questions. Last thing I want to mention is, of course, Pop Quiz 3 is really largely about this lecture and a few others before this. So stay tuned for that as well. All right, that's all I got. Stay safe and healthy, guys.